Hey, hello everybody. So, I am happy to be here for our live stream event for this month. We have a lot of questions because the first part of the month was holiday here, so we took a little break, but we are back in the saddle. And I have a number of questions to go through here today. So, whatever we don't get to today, we will push to the next live stream and we'll try to address them in the order in which they were received the next time that we meet. So I just want to give you a little overview of some of the questions that were submitted, and then we will dive in. I will take moments of rest between questions. Usually I'll go through the first two or three, and then I'll take a moment of rest and just see how things are going in the chat or in the comment section. So please feel invited to comment, reflect, ask questions as we go, as I am going to take some moments to reflect on that. Okay. And if this is your first time joining me, welcome. We typically hop on to do live Q&As for my online community and students on the first and third Thursday of every month at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I hope that you will come back and join us again next month. Okay, so let's just dive right into it. The first question that we have, how can I tell if it is my anxious attachment or if he's just not that into me? So this is a great question. I hear it a lot. So you want to think about, how do you feel when you have met someone new, the sparks are flying, and maybe the butterflies have kicked up in your belly, and it seems like things are spinning and they just won't settle down. And you're not sure if that uneasiness is some aspect of your intuition that is trying to speak to you. Maybe you're getting a gut feeling about it, but it's kind of hard to read it because you're worried maybe this is just my anxiety getting away or getting in the way. And so you might be left with a feeling of being anxious, confused, or self-blaming. Maybe you're wondering, am I just sabotaging something good or am I ignoring red flags because I just don't want to be alone, right? So you might start questioning those things. Now, if you've ever found yourself stuck in that spot between self-doubt and suspicion, especially early in the dating experience, in this segment, I want to help you kind of tune into what is yours, what is theirs, and how you can get clear on that so you can show up with more self-trust and what I like to call emotional self-sovereignty. Okay. So let's start by exploring what might be happening underneath this question. So maybe you have started seeing someone who is calm, kind, consistent, but something in you is kind of a panicky feeling. It is a panicking at the lack of urgency or intensity that's present in the relationship. Or maybe you're on the other end of the spectrum. The communication is inconsistent and you're not sure if you're being avoidant of red flags, or maybe I'm being overly sensitive due to my past wounds, right? So we might be on either end of that spectrum. Both of those experiences can come with those feelings of self-doubt, fear of rejection, or the impulse to try to chase down clarity and force a said commitment before someone is ready or before they can pull away. So the three important aspects to this question that I would identify are that number one, anxious attachment can distort our perception of emotional pacing. So, what's normal for someone that's more securely attached can feel like disinterest for someone that might be more anxious, right? Because they exist on two ends of that spectrum, right? Secondly, slow or neutral behavior is not always a red flag. It could just be a sign of healthy pacing. And third, inconsistency, on the other hand, is a valid cue, not just an anxious overreaction. So we shouldn't necessarily immediately doubt our perceptions. We may just want to investigate the reality of what meaning we're making out of it, right? So I think it's important that we dig into these points because this is how we're going to build that muscle of discernment so we don't abandon our needs or dismiss our intuition. Okay. So, the three takeaways that I want you to get out of this. Number one, anxious attachment can sometimes mistake steady calmness for coldness, and vice versa. People who have anxious attachment can misinterpret a kind of cold detachment as emotional calm. Okay. Secondly, your intuition is wise, but it needs an emotional regulation in order to be trustworthy. And inconsistency is a signal of their emotional confusion, not necessarily a challenge for you to have to prove your worth, right? So let's unpack this. Number one, calmness is not the same as coldness, right? So, anxious attachment can sometimes mistake, people who have anxious attachment can sometimes mistake a steady calmness for coldness. And just as easily, we can confuse emotional detachment for emotional maturity. Okay. And well, why does that happen? Because when you have been conditioned to associate love with intensity, then emotional highs and lows or unpredictable validation or inconsistent validation, the rush of being chosen and right after you've been dropped, right? Then when you encounter a calm, steady, grounded presence, that can feel, on the one hand, underwhelming, unfamiliar, and maybe even suspicious, right? So you might find yourself asking yourself, well, why doesn't he text me obsessively? Is he just not that into me because they're not overwhelmed by their passion for me? But a securely attached person isn't going to kind of test you in this way. They're going to show up more consistently. And if your nervous system is used to some kind of chaos or inconsistent love, then that steadiness can register as disinterest. And it's actually, whereas it might actually be the thing you're really looking for, which leads us to the flip side, right? So when we have anxious attachment, not we don't only have that experience of seeking the familiar, we also have the experience of seeking what was missing, what we wanted, what we needed. So while you may be drawn to intensity or a kind of unavailability or inconsistent, unpredictable passion, another part of you is equally going to crave ease, stability, connection, and emotional reliability. So the challenge is when you've spent much of your life overstimulated by inconsistency or filling up the space just to try to be seen, always bracing for whatever the next emotional shift is going to be, it can become hard to tell the difference between what is genuine emotional maturity and true calm versus someone that's emotionally checked out and disconnected, right? Unaffected. So what happens? Well, you might feel pulled towards someone who's distant, aloof, unavailable, because that kind of aloofness mimics a stillness that you never really had, but probably needed. And that's going to create a false sense of safety. So in that space, you might start to project onto them a depth of maturity that you assume must be there. Oh, they're just the strong silent type, right? When in reality, you're sensing a kind of absence, not grounded presence. Okay. And so this is where anxious attachment can get a little tricky. So we are longing for steadiness, but our internal compass isn't really calibrated to recognize it when it shows up. And because we might have lacked that kind of stable attunement growing up, our ability to discern that real emotional steadiness from dissociation or disengagement, for example, can be compromised. But it is not our fault per se. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It's just a survival adaptation. But learning to tell the difference will allow you to stop chasing after intensity or emotional unavailability and start choosing real connection. So the next time you find yourself spiraling, you might try just taking a pause, putting your hand on your heart, breathing, and asking yourself or saying to yourself, they're taking their time, and I'm allowed to take mine too. And I'm just going to be in stillness until my environment rearranges itself around me to offer more clarity, because I don't need to be pushed around by ambiguity. I can sit with ambiguity. I can be with the not knowing. That's not going to push me around, right? Now you're tapping into that intuitive self, which leads us to the second point, right? Being able to access that intuition, that intuitive self, requires some degree of self-regulation, right? The ability to regulate your emotional energy. So, how do I know if it's my anxiety talking or my, let's say, gut intuition trying to protect me? So, that's a powerful inquiry. And here's the thing, both anxiety and your intuition live and communicate through the body, which is why it can feel so confusing and difficult to tell them apart sometimes. But they do carry very different energetic signatures and emotional intentions. So, anxiety often arrives in the form of urgency. It rushes in fast and furious, demanding answers, pushing for clarity, spinning worst case scenarios. And so that urgency is a clue that your survival system is online. Something in you feels threatened. And so you're trying to protect yourself from being left, rejected, or abandoned. Whereas your intuition, on the other hand, speaks in a slower, softer voice. It's rooted not in fear, but in a kind of presence, right? It has a bird's eye view of your life and everything in it. And so while it can guide you away from unsafe people or situations, it does so without falling into an unending panic. So intuition is connected to the part of you that is timeless, spiritual, wise, and steady, and it does not rush you. So, how do you begin to tell the difference? Well, one practice is just to slow down and get curious. Am I feeling activated in my body like I need to rush to fix this or control something right now with a sense of urgency? Or is there a sense that, I have to know, I have to act? Then that is more likely anxiety. But if your inner voice is saying something like, well, that doesn't feel quite right. Maybe I need to take a pause and observe this a little longer. Or, well, something feels off, but maybe I don't need to decide anything just yet. I'm going to lean in and see how this unfolds. That's more of an intuitive voice. Okay. And so the distinction is that anxiety is going to cloud your vision. It's going to trying to take over control, whereas intuition clears it and it guides you into discovering things for yourself. Anxiety is going to tighten your chest. It's going to shorten your breath. It's going to make you feel revved up. Whereas intuition slows the pulse. It softens your gaze and it opens you up to a deeper knowing. Okay. And being able to access that deeper knowing requires a degree of regulation, right? Softening the body means activating the vagus nerve, which is the part of you that can relate, that can identify the safety cues in your environment, right? That can find that inner place of calm. So it's just very hard to access that when you're in full-on defense mode. It's like trying to hear a whisper in the middle of a war zone. So we try to afford this kind of regulation by building a bridge back to the body because when we are in that defense mode, usually the energy is running up to the head, right? And we start spiraling. So we might use things like somatic grounding exercises, bringing the energy back down, allowing yourself to use the body's resources to process and churn that energy. Things like, and doing things proactively so you know how to do that in the moment, right? In my practices, that's guided visualizations, meditation, art making, embodied practices like authentic movement, rituals to create a safe and sacred place for yourself, right? Getting into a practice of connecting to my intuition when I'm not in an activated state so that I have a blueprint for that when I am. So when I feel the butterflies of activation, I don't assume it's a bad thing and run away, right? Because that means fear is in control. I'm not going to leap to label it as a red or even a green flag. Instead, I'm going to say, well, what is this feeling trying to show me? And can I sit with it long enough to hear what might be beneath all the noise, right? Because, excitement and anxiety light up the same part of the brain. And the only difference lies in, how we are interpreting the sensation, how we're making meaning of the context. And I wouldn't want to give up all my butterflies just in case it might mean it won't work out, right? So that's an important point to make, right? Is it fear from the past or is it guidance about the present and the future? And just be willing to sit with the not knowing for a little while because eventually clarity will come, right? It's just giving it enough time and space to let that clarity rise to the surface. And now that brings me to the third point, which is that inconsistency can be a clue, not necessarily your anxiety, right? So let's also name this. If somebody is hot one day and cold the next, if they're pulling you close and then vanishing or sending you mixed signals, that is not your anxious attachment acting up. That is external inconsistency, and it is valid to feel anxious about it, right? You don't need to psychoanalyze their behavior, and you don't have to make excuses to cling tighter. You are allowed in that moment to take a step back and to notice there's something incongruent going on here. Because your emotional energy is sacred. And even if you do have an anxious pattern, that doesn't mean that you're reading it incorrectly or that your boundaries don't matter, right? So just drop a yes in the chat or the comments if any of this sounds familiar, or maybe this question is living rent-free in your brain. Is it just my anxious attachment or are they not that into me? Right? And if you can relate, here's a reframe that I would offer you. It is okay to slow down, to connect with your body, learn how to breathe and to regulate the energy moving through your body, and then to check the facts without blaming yourself for having a need for clarity, right? And if you've been holding your breath, kind of scanning for clues and second guessing every text, this is just your invitation to release that and exhale because you're not too much. You may just be used to overfunctioning and you're not needy. You're just learning how to ask for what you need without apologizing for it. And if someone can't meet you with consistency and clarity, that's not necessarily your anxious spiraling or even some kind of chemistry. It is confusion, and you have a right to ask for more than that. So take your time. Let your nervous system catch up to the kind of love that you want, that you are calling in. And remember that you don't have to perform in order to acquire that connection, right? The love that is right for you will feel steady, and you get to decide when you're ready to receive that. Okay. So I hope that that was helpful. Let's see, what other questions did we have for today? I'm gonna pull up my notes. Okay. So what is the difference between expressing my needs honestly or unhealthy boundaries? Okay. So expressing your needs honestly with healthy boundaries means that you have taken the time to understand what you're feeling and why, so that when you speak, it is coming from a grounded place. You're not demanding that somebody else fix or carry your emotions for you. You are inviting them to participate in your emotional experiences and processes to create connection and not control. So vulnerability becomes a strength here because you're offering your truth with openness, knowing that it may not be met in exactly the way that you're hoping for. And that takes courage, the kind of courage that builds real intimacy. But when we skip that step of emotional processing and we share from a raw, unfiltered place, and we stop making room for the other person to accept or reject that emotional invitation, it can turn into a kind of emotional dumping. And in those moments, we might think we're just being unfiltered, we're just being honest, but we are being without boundaries. We're actually asking others to hold what we have not yet learned to carry for ourselves. And that's why sometimes it's more appropriate to share those struggles with someone that is trained to model how to do this, especially if it was never taught to you. right? And maybe even do the processing with you, like a therapist or a counselor or a coach, right? Before you go bringing that into your very important and intimate relationships. Now, honesty and boundaries work best when they come from self-ownership and a desire for real connection, not just releasing or venting or dumping on someone. And you do have the capacity to show up with your own personal authority, even in your most tender moments. And that is the difference between an unhealthy boundary, right, and expressing your needs honestly. Okay, good question. Why can't I stop spiraling when they need space, even when they reassure me and check in? Okay. So it is completely understandable to struggle when someone you care about asks for space, even when they are offering reassurance and checking in. So when you have an activated attachment system, especially if you lean more anxious or fearful, avoidant, or disorganized, space can feel like abandonment even when it's not. And so your nervous system might interpret that pause as danger, triggering, old wounds where distance led to disconnection or rejection or some kind of negative consequence. So even if your mind understands the reassurance, your body may still be bracing for some kind of loss. And that doesn't mean that anything is wrong with you. It just means your attachment system is working overtime to protect you from what it perceives to be a threat, right? So what helps is gently turning inwards when you're having those spiraling moments and soothing the part of you that feels young. Maybe this is an inner child part, right? Scared or unseen. And just letting that part, that inner child aspect, know that it is safe now and it doesn't have to earn love by chasing or clinging. And so, with a little bit of time and some healing, you'll find that the space that a partner needs doesn't take away from your worth or your bond itself. It actually offers room for trust to grow, and it creates an opportunity for them to move towards you, which will allow you to trust that connection even more. So, again, you're not wrong for spiraling. You're just being asked to heal something tender, and that is a powerful and courageous invitation. Okay. Okay. What else do we have here? What are the signs of fearful avoidance in the early stages of dating? Okay. So before we dive into the signs of fearful avoidant behavior, sometimes called disorganized attachment in early dating, I just want to offer a little compassion for both sides of this dynamic, because if you're watching this segment, you might be the one experiencing the push-pull, maybe feeling confused, hurt, and unsure of where you stand. Or you may be someone who identifies with these patterns yourself. Maybe you have felt overwhelmed by intimacy even when you truly care about someone. Maybe you have pulled away from closeness without really understanding why you felt like you had to pull away. Either way, I just want to reiterate that this is a judgment-free zone. And that's really important because fearful avoidant or disorganized attachment often stems from really painful early life experiences. And it's not a personality flaw. It is a nervous system response. It's a way that the mind and body learned to survive a world where love and safety did not go hand in hand, where your sources of comfort were also a source of threat. And so it's a pattern where someone deeply craves love and connection, but also fears it. And so they probably grew up in environments where caregivers were both the source of inconsistent love and affection, right? Where emotional intimacy was predictably unpredictable, overwhelming, and unsafe. So as adults, this creates a kind of internal push-pull. So come closer, I need you, but wait, go away, I don't trust this, right? And it's confusing, not just for the person that is dating them, but for the fearful, avoidant person themselves. So when we talk about these signs in early dating, it's not about blaming or labeling people. It is about understanding the relational nervous system at work and how we can stay grounded, clear, and kind both to ourselves and to another person, when we see these patterns starting to pop up, right? Because healing starts with awareness, and awareness gives us a choice. So let's circle back to the original question. There was a little more detail that was provided. It felt like he was really into me, texting every day, opening up, wanting to see me. Then, as soon as I started to feel hopeful, he pulled away. He still pops back in, but it's never consistent. It's confusing, and honestly, it's messing with my self-esteem. What is going on? Okay. So, thank you for your honesty. That disorienting experience is what we aim to unpack in this segment because understanding the pattern behind it can really help us to make all the difference. Okay. So for today, I'm going to get into three key signs of fearful, avoidant, or disorganized attachment that can show up in the early phases of dating. And the first one is we can have a fast-moving emotional connection, maybe even love bombing, and then it's followed by a kind of sudden turnabout or withdrawal. Or there could be hot and cold communication that leaves you feeling confused and guessing. And thirdly, there can be a mix of longing and fear, both within the fearful avoidant partner, and then that stimulates the longing and fear within yourself. So let's dig into each of these three elements. The first one, intense connection followed by withdrawal. So our fearful avoidant, what I call spice of lifers, they crave connection. They do. They crave it very deeply. So at the start, it may feel like a dream. They are open, they are very expressive, oftentimes charismatic. They can even display vulnerability. They want to spend time with you, maybe even ask really deep questions so you feel close to them very quickly. And they might even be the ones to initiate the intimacy early on. But just as you start to relax into that closeness, something shifts almost inexplicably. Then it's as if they retreat. They are second guessing. They become distant or distracted. And it's not necessarily about you, it's about the unfolding layers of intimacy and how that starts to make things feel unsafe because it is stirring up these old wounds, the fears of being abandoned, of being engulfed, of being controlled or manipulated or otherwise hurt in some way. And so it's usually not a lack of care, it's about a lack of safety and closeness. And while that means that their behavior may not be personal, it still impacts you. And that is where self-advocacy and standing your ground with healthy boundaries becomes absolutely essential. And when you do that, it can shift the dynamic regardless of how emotionally confused they might be. Because you cannot be confused enough to encourage someone else out of their confusion. So do not wait for them to set the tone. In the face of their confusion, you will find clarity. And the more that you articulate that clarity, the clearer they must respond to you. Okay. So understanding this push-pull isn't really about excusing behavior, it's about reclaiming your power in the face of it and advocating for yourself based on the impact of their behavior on you. Secondly, we have that hot and cold behavior, right? That's that classic push-pull dynamic. They reach out, you feel hopeful, and then they ghost you or they get super ambivalent and vague. Just when you start to give up, now they show up again with charm and sweetness, and maybe even trying to act like nothing happened. And that is because as you started to pull away, the proximity felt safer again. And so now that made them want to close it. It's that push-pull, wanting but not trusting. And so their nervous system may read closeness as danger and as reward, just as much as it might read distance as danger and as safety, right? And it happens cyclically, kind of over and over again. And because of that, and because it's usually intermittent kind of schedule, it can become very addictive. So these are partners that you have a kind of learned to hate to love and love to hate. So you want to ask yourself, am I actually connecting with them or just craving the version of them that shows up every once in a while? Am I grounded when I'm with them, or am I constantly scanning for signs of closeness or distance, like walking on eggshells? So that inconsistency is a sign of their unresolved attachment fears and trauma, which doesn't make them undesirable. It doesn't make them wrong. It just highlights where they are on their path. But it can point to your own, wherever your own nervous system is getting caught up in living out their early traumas. Okay. The third thing, longing for love, but being afraid of it, right? This is really the heartbreaking experience that a lot of fearful, avoidant, or disorganized folks have, is that deep down they really do want love and they're very lovable. They're not really cold at their core. They're not incapable. In fact, they can usually have a deep sensitivity to the human condition, which is why I call them spice of lifers. But love often feels unsafe because they confuse empathy with enmeshment. So they wind up oscillating back and forth, wanting love and then fearing it at the same time. And this is why you might feel drawn in and then suddenly pushed out. And if you do have any unhealed wounds, especially around feeling like you've gone unseen or unchosen, that dynamic can be especially triggering. But we could also look at this as an invitation, right? An invitation to ask, what part of me feels rejected or abandoned when they pull away? What am I hoping that this person will give me that I'm not yet giving to myself? And if I continue to pursue someone that is inconsistent and rejects me, how am I showing up inconsistently for myself? How does that mean I'm still rejecting myself? Because often when we feel intense energy around them, it's usually either grief over a part of ourselves that we have projected onto them, or it's a projection that they have sent over into us, and now we are carrying it for them and living out, reliving to revise that wound and so on, right? Something like that. So to recap this, 3 signs of fearful, avoidant, or disorganized attachment in dating. Number 1, fast emotional intimacy followed by a sudden withdrawal, right? They crave closeness, but when it starts to get real, the fear response, attachment triggers kick in. Number 2, hot and cold behavior that tends to keep you guessing, right? The inconsistency is a reflection of that internal conflict, but not necessarily a lack of care. And number 3, we have that deep longing for love mixed with a fear of getting hurt. And so their actions may not be personal, but they still impact you. So healthy boundaries and self-advocacy are really key, right? And I also want to reassure you that fearful, avoidant, or disorganized spice of lifers, they can and do heal. And I know because I was fearful, avoidant for a very long time. And so for years, 35 years in fact, I carried both this desperate longing for closeness and a deep fear of losing myself in it. I would crave that deep connection and then I'd pull away just when it was within reach, or my feelings would turn off like a light switch. Why did I even like this person to begin with? And for a long time, I thought I was just too much, not enough, or somehow too damaged to have a healthy relationship. But everything started to shift when I stopped trying to fix myself from the outside and find validation outside of myself. And I started to connecting to something deeper inside of myself, right? And so for me, it was through creativity and connecting to my body that the tides began to turn. It was through, I'm an art therapist by trade, so it was through art and movement and doing things differently, shifting my focus. It also took 3 years of celibacy and not allowing myself to turn my energy in that direction, instead started moving it up this way, that I really started to find a doorway to what I call soul-centered security, but it is access to transcendent experiences. And that afforded me a sense of safety that didn't come from someone else, not even from my secure husband now, although he does provide a lot of security for me. It came from being fully present in my body, connected to my entire range of emotion, and knowing and trusting that I belong to something bigger than myself, to a divine spark that lives in each and every one of us. And that's what really helped me to build this better relationship with myself and all my parts, all my inner children, all my protectors, right? so that I could show up to a healthy relationship with someone else and to a healthy relationship with my life in and of itself. So if you're someone who has struggled with fearful avoidant patterns, believe me when I tell you, your nervous system is not irreparably damaged. Your desire for love in your life is a divine calling, and your healing is simply a process of relaxing into the love that you already are and will always have access to. So, if you are in connection with someone who shows these signs, to you, I would let you know that your clarity, your boundaries, and your self-trust is going to guide you towards what is right for you, whether they're able to meet you there or not, because no amount of pushing, persuading, or trying to inspire them to be where they are not, if they are not ready, isn't going to help. Okay? The best thing you can do is show up with the best of your intentions. You can knock on the door, but they need to open it up and let you in. Okay? So let me know in the comments, have you noticed signs of fearful avoidance in yourself? Maybe in someone you have dated? And if so, what has helped you find more clarity and compassion in your relationships? I would love to know that. Let me know. Okay. So we have another question here. How to stop feeling jealous when you're not the one being chosen? Okay. So this is a powerful question and one I think everyone can relate to at some point in their life. How can I stop falling into old patterns of jealousy and not feeling chosen, especially when someone I had a vague connection with starts giving me mixed signals again while also showing interest in another woman? Okay. So this is raw, this is real, and it is deeply human because what do you do when someone who once left you in limbo starts orbiting you again? Maybe they're liking your posts, they are name dropping you in chats, but they are never actually messaging you directly. And then suddenly, maybe they're lavishing public praise on someone else in the same circle. It's probably going to sting and it's going to make you question yourself. And even though you know the connection was never clear or quite there, something old gets reactivated. There's an old ache around not being chosen again. And if you've ever been caught in this emotional triangle where your nervous system feels like it is playing musical chairs with love, then in this segment, we want to explore some aspects of that more in depth. Now, this question came from someone in my online community who describes themselves in kind of a situationship. Romantic one day, ignored the next, and when she tried to talk about what was really going on, he deflected and would say that they were just pals, and then they stopped speaking. But a year later, this person resurfaced with small gestures, comments, likes, and casual mentions, while simultaneously admiring another woman very publicly. And so now she finds herself mentally spiraling, not because she wants him back, but because it really hurts to feel replaceable. So I want to break this down into three component parts so that we can open the door to something that feels more aligned. Okay. So the first thing is the pain that you're feeling, it's not really about him or her. It's most likely about an old emotional wound that got activated. And a part of you that believes if I'm not chosen, then maybe I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable enough, right? But the truth is, you were chosen. You were chosen by God, by Source, by the universe for a much higher form of love, the kind that is clear, secure, sacred, and soul shaking. And sometimes the universe honors that choice by taking away anything that would block it. Even when you are still clinging to the version of that relationship that you thought you wanted. So this is rejection as protection, right? You weren't rejected, you were redirected. You were chosen. So now you have to let yourself be chosen. Okay. Secondly, jealousy is really good information, right? So let's talk about jealousy because I know it doesn't feel good, right? And it might make you feel like, well, if I'm feeling jealous, then all the healing work that I've done must not have worked because It's shameful to feel jealous, right? I don't want to get hooked in this feeling again. I must have been doing it wrong. But it's not shameful, it's information. It tells you that I'm still afraid I have to compete for love. I'm still sourcing my worth from somebody else's attention, right? So jealousy is really good information because you want to look at that because those are some of the things that may be blocking you for that higher love from that higher love getting in. It's also a sign of a fear of loss, okay? So you want to ask yourself, what part of me did I project into this man and that I now believe I lost when he left? And what part of myself did I see in him, maybe validation, admiration, or excitement and hope that I need to now reclaim for myself, right? So jealousy is connected to loss, and it says, go retrieve that part of yourself, reclaim her, take her back. And when you do, that jealousy eases because it doesn't have any job left to do, right? But I think it's important. We can't really talk about jealousy without also making mention of envy. Okay. So jealousy says, don't take what I have. And envy says, that's something I'll never have. Okay. And so when the person that you liked seems to have chosen someone else, these two feelings can collide, right? Jealousy and envy, especially if your loss is somebody else's gain. But envy is just showing you where you have stopped trusting in your own power, okay? Where you have forgotten that what is meant for you is never going to require some kind of competition. So instead of cutting the cords, right, or trying to pin some envious feelings on this person and jealous feelings towards the ex, what if you just loved the part of you that feels left behind? And as you start to love that part of you, notice how the trust comes back. And now there's no need for jealousy or envy because you haven't lost anything and nobody else has anything that you couldn't have, need, want, or capable of. So the third point I want to make around this, the hardest and oftentimes most liberating truth is that in this situation, from what I am hearing, nothing was ever clearly offered, not even from the start, right? And yet it can still feel like you were rejected. And why is that? Because when we are in our attachment hunger, when we are hungry for that connection, even breadcrumbs can feel like a meal. We get used to living off of rations. And we start building, castles out of small gestures. But the discontent that you feel, the jealousy that you have, it is a little zing to wake you up, right? And now you're asking, right here in this question, why am I investing so much in someone who never fully showed up for me? Bravo. Just the fact that you're wondering indicates you're at a turning point. And that's the moment where that jealous triangle collapses, not because you lost something, but because you remembered something about yourself and your own worth. Okay. So to wrap this up, if you've been battling that ache of not being chosen, this is your reminder. You're not here to fight for scraps. You are here to be met fully, clearly, lovingly. Okay. That old dynamic, the one that made you feel like love was some prize that you had to earn, that is collapsing because you are evolving. You are no longer available for confusion, mixed signals, comparisons, or emotional limbo, right? You don't need to win anyone's affection. You don't need to watch anyone else's social media for clues. You don't need to rehearse the feeling of being passed over again and again. What you're craving is already there for you. And in the material world, that means it's on its way. And it doesn't require you to be prettier, cooler, more charismatic, smarter. It only requires you to be aligned with your own truth, is that you are already chosen. So I'd invite you to drop a yes or a thumbs up in the chat or the comments if this speaks to your spirit, right? And if this is the kind of perspective that you would like to adopt, right? Because this is what's going to allow you to let go of the jealousy or the envy and start trusting yourself and reclaiming yourself. Okay. All right. So I'm going to take a pause there. We have some questions coming in. I'm anxiously attached to my girlfriend and she is rather avoidant. She's had a hard time expressing emotions, and when she goes quiet, I get insecure. She feels unsafe in those scenarios. Any tips? I get insecure. So that was the third question that we answered, spiraling even when reassurance is offered, right? So I'd have you watch the replay and go back to the third question that we answered when we talked about why can't I stop spiraling when they need space, even when they reassure me and check in, right? So I'd have you check that out. I keep asking if something is wrong, and subconsciously I emit insecurity in those situations. She's on vacation now and she opens up more over text. Things get better when we see each other less. How do I keep this up when we're together, or what can I do to better the relationship? We both want to work on it and she's willing to work on herself as much as I am. Okay, so things get better when you're apart because the distance between you grows, which means that the emotional energy exchange is modulated to a degree that she feels safer and more comfortable. If when you're together, you're always checking everything. Are we okay? Is everything all right? What can I be doing? How can I make this work? Your energy's like up here somewhere and it filled up the space. So that means that it's kind of crowding her out of it, right? And some people say, well, isn't that what we should be doing? If we really care about something, we should be checking in, checking in, checking in. So the issue is that when we're doing that, whether it's verbally or non-verbally, to a high degree, we're not communicating care or consideration, we're communicating distrust. And if we're communicating distrust of someone else, it's usually because we feel a distrust of ourselves, our worthiness, our lovability, distrusting that we would survive it if this doesn't work out, right? So of course, it's lovely to care about the success of a relationship and to do what we can to affect the success of a relationship, but it needs to be buffered by the understanding that, but if it doesn't work out, it'll hurt, but I'm not afraid of hurt feelings. And I'm not afraid of my fear of hurt feelings. Hurt feelings are a part of life. And so if it doesn't work out, that's okay. It wasn't for me. If it works out, it'll be for a reason. If it doesn't work out, it'll be for another reason. And both of those will be opportunities to grow. So the checking in and the worrying and the wanting to make it work, you want to dig into where's that fear coming from? Where's that aspiration coming from? Because there might be some historical content that fills up the space between you that may be compelling her to pull back. Because, and it's not just you, when it fills up the space between you, now it's likely turning on something that she's also carrying, but holding in a different way, right? And so this is where now we fall into that dance of the anxious avoidant trap. And just to speak to that a little bit, when you are, a lot of this is energetics too. You know, it's not about behavior, it's not about what you say, it's not about what you do. It's the energy you carry when you're in the space with someone. And you can be saying, doing all the right things, but if your energy is spinning in your head, in your heart, in your body, floating above your head, that is going to be read by the other person, and that is what they're going to respond to. Okay. So it's not about tips for negotiating something with this person. It's more about finding your self-trust, finding trust in the universe, finding trust and ease with yourself, and just being able to connect to this person on that level of trust, right? Trusting that if something's not right, she'll let you know. And you can ask if you don't trust that yet, you can ask every so often, but not all the time. That makes any sense. And then as you start to pull back a little bit, you have made some space for them now to move towards you. And you want that space for them to move towards you because that's really good information, right? Is it working because I'm overworking it? Or is it working because there's a genuine connection here and there's an equal and reciprocal investment? It's hard to know if you're always trying to make it work. Shouldn't have to make anything work. It does require effort, but relationships are supposed to be a refuge from work, right? So you have to relax into them, and that starts by relaxing into yourself. Okay. Um, this is the best advice I've heard in months. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad that was helpful. Thank you for sharing your question. All right. So thank you everyone for joining me here today. I think we're going to bring it to a close for now. So appreciate you joining me here live. And if there were questions that you asked that we didn't answer here in the live stream, they will be top of the list the next time we meet, which is typically the first and third Thursday of every month, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thank you very much. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your week, and thank you to my helper, Besam. And we will see you in a couple weeks.